The departure gate at JFK pulsed with its usual chaos, announcements echoing from the intercom, the rattle of rolling luggage across tile floors, children weaving between tired parents, and travelers clutching coffee cups like lifelines. Somewhere in the middle of this storm of motion stood Evelyn Whitmore, tall and polished, her silk blouse immaculate despite the humid crush of people around her. She adjusted the strap of her Hermes bag for the third time, then shifted the weight of the designer diaper bag digging into her shoulder. In her arms, her 6-month-old daughter Charlotte wailed with a force that seemed far too big for such a tiny body. The sound cut through the gate like glass splintering. Evelyn tried to bounce her baby gently, whispering soothing words through a clenched jaw. "Shh, Charlotte, please, not now, not here." Her voice was tight, desperate, the kind that carried more fear than comfort. She had faced boardrooms filled with hostile executives without a flicker of doubt, but nothing rattled her like the sound of her own baby's cries. Sweat gathered at her temple. Around her, heads turned. Some passengers offered looks of sympathy, but most glanced away with annoyance, silently cursing their luck that this baby might end up on their flight. Evelyn felt the weight of those stares, heavy as judgment. Charlotte's cries built into a crescendo, her tiny fists thrashing against Evelyn's chest. Evelyn fumbled one-handed with the formula bottle, trying to measure powder with trembling fingers, but everything spilled wrong, the bottle clumsy in her grip. Her breath came short, her cheeks flushed hot. A woman in line leaned toward her and offered, "Do you want me to hold her for a moment?" Evelyn's head snapped up too quickly. "No, I've got it." The words spilled sharp, defensive. Admitting she couldn't handle her own child felt like failure. She was Evelyn, and Whitmore. Failure was not an option. A few rows back in the economy boarding line, 13-year-old Malik Thompson stood beside his Aunt Rosa, quiet and observant. His clothes told a story Evelyn's wardrobe never could. Faded Bulls jersey hanging loose on his growing frame, jeans frayed at the cuffs, sneakers scuffed so badly they seemed to hold together more by hope than rubber. But his eyes, dark, steady, older than his years, took everything in. He noticed the polished mother with the screaming baby, the way her lips pressed into a thin line as passengers sighed around her. He noticed her hands trembling when she thought no one was looking. His Aunt Rosa checked her purse again, nerves spilling into her voice. "You got your boarding pass?" she asked for the 4th time. Malik tapped his pocket where the crumpled ticket rested like treasure. "Yes, Aunt Rosa, I've got it." He had held it so tightly earlier that the ink had smudged, but the flight number was still clear. This flight mattered. Tomorrow morning's audition at the Manhattan Conservatory of Music was everything. His one shot to break free of the cramped South Side apartment he'd shared with his grandmother until cancer took her 2 months ago. The gate felt like a stage where no one had asked him to perform. Babies cried, coffee spilled, couples argued about seat assignments, yet through it all he hummed softly under his breath, a habit his grandmother had given him. "When the world gets too loud, baby, you make your own music," she used to say. The tune he carried was old, a spiritual she'd sung while folding laundry, while the gas got cut off, while life pressed in too tight. Malik's voice was low, almost invisible, but those closest to him could hear. Charlotte's screams climbed higher, reaching a pitch that drew groans from impatient travelers. Evelyn rocked her harder, whispered sharper, desperation slipping into every movement. She could feel people's irritation pricking her skin. She could hear one man mutter to his wife, "Great, 5 hours of that." Her pride stiffened her spine. She would not be that mother, the one who couldn't manage her own child. She pressed Charlotte closer, trying to hush her, but the baby's tiny body arched with rage. In the background, Malik's humming floated through the din, unnoticed by most, but carrying a warmth that contrasted with the cold stares surrounding Evelyn. He wasn't looking at her. He wasn't looking at anyone. He was lost in his grandmother's memory, in the comfort of a song meant to heal. Yet something in the rhythm caught Charlotte's attention. For the briefest moment, her screams stuttered into hiccups, her red face turning toward the sound. Evelyn didn't notice. Too wrapped in her own storm, too proud to hear the small thread of peace rising from the boy no one else was watching. The boarding announcement crackled through the speakers. Business class first. Evelyn moved toward the gate, shoulders tight, baby shrieking in her arms. Malik's group wouldn't board for a long while yet. He stepped forward with his aunt, eyes lingering on the mother ahead, unaware that before this flight was over, his voice would silence more than a baby. It would silence a cabin full of doubt, a prideful woman's shame, and awaken something far greater than anyone expected. The plane was waiting. The story hadn't even begun. The plane smelled faintly of coffee, jet fuel, and recycled air as passengers shuffled down the narrow aisle. Evelyn Whitmore walked ahead of the business class line, her posture stiff, one hand clenching the strap of her bag, the other struggling to cradle her writhing baby. Charlotte's cries had grown shrill, echoing off the overhead bins, filling every corner of the cabin with restless energy. Evelyn felt each sound pierce her like a needle. She tried to smile, tried to project control, but her jaw ached from holding everything in place. Sliding into her wide business-class seat, Evelyn barely had time to exhale before Charlotte's screams pitched higher. She tried the pacifier, rejected. She tried Sophie the giraffe, an overpriced toy that squeaked uselessly, thrown to the floor. She mixed formula with shaking hands, spilling powder on her designer blouse. "Please, please, just drink," she whispered, but Charlotte turned her head and wailed louder. The man in 4B, heavy-set and smug in an expensive suit, leaned back with a theatrical sigh. He jabbed the call button until a flight attendant appeared. "Excuse me," he said, loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "I paid for business class to avoid exactly this. Isn't there a policy about crying infants?" The attendant's smile never faltered. "I understand, sir. I'll see if we have noise-canceling headphones available." "Headphones?" he scoffed. "I shouldn't have to wear headphones in business class. This is unacceptable." Evelyn's face burned. She wanted to lash out, wanted to tell him she had every right to be here, that she had paid for her seat too. But Charlotte's shrieks swallowed her anger, leaving only shame. She turned away, bouncing the baby desperately, pretending not to hear the whispers and side glances. Far back in economy, Malik buckled into 32B, wedged between his worn backpack and the window. He hummed softly, almost without realizing it. The tune was simple, a melody his grandmother used to carry him through nights when the heat went out or when hunger gnawed at their bellies. "Music makes the dark smaller," she had said. Malik believed her, so he hummed low and steady, the sound wrapping him in memory. The elderly woman beside him, Miss Leia, tilted her head listening. "That's a pretty tune," she said kindly. Malik flushed, embarrassed. "Sorry, didn't mean to be loud." "Don't apologize." "For music, child," she said, patting his hand. "Never for music." The engines roared to life as the plane taxied. Evelyn's nerves frayed with every second. Charlotte screamed through the safety announcements, through the rattling of trays and buckling of belts. Evelyn tried to rock her, to soothe her, but the harder she tried, the louder her daughter cried. Her chest ached with frustration. Around her, passengers shifted uncomfortably, rolling eyes exchanging sighs. The man in 4B shook his head like a disappointed judge. As the wheels left the ground, Charlotte's cries spiked into something sharper, almost panicked. The change in pressure pressed on her tiny ears, and she screamed as though the world itself were tearing her apart. Evelyn's hands shook, tears blurred her vision. She whispered through gritted teeth, "Why won't you stop? Why can't I do this?" In row 32, Malik closed his eyes and hummed a little louder. He didn't know it yet, but the sound carried forward, threading its way through the cabin like a fragile lifeline. Charlotte's cries faltered for the briefest moment, her little head tilting, her fists unclenching just slightly, as though she had heard something her mother had not. And while Evelyn sat in the soft leather seat, drowning in shame and exhaustion, Malik's quiet song waited at the edge of the storm, ready to change everything. The cabin air felt heavier by the minute, thick with the weight of Charlotte's cries. The flight attendants wore fixed smiles, but their eyes betrayed strain. Some passengers pressed headphones tighter to their ears. Others sighed dramatically, shifting in their seats as if making sure Evelyn felt their disapproval. Evelyn tried every trick she had read in parenting books, rocking, whispering, swaying gently in her seat, but nothing worked. Charlotte's wails pierced through every attempt, rattling Evelyn's already frayed composure. "Some people shouldn't travel with babies," the Bassinin. Esmond in 4B muttered, not bothering to lower his voice. A few passengers nearby nodded in quiet agreement. Evelyn bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood, determined not to cry in front of them. She was Evelyn Whitmore, Yale graduate, Fortune 500 executive, woman who had handled the sharpest boardrooms, yet here she was, undone by a 6-month-old child. Behind her, Malik shifted in his seat, fingers tapping the armrest in time with his humming. He had tried to keep it low, just for himself, but now it grew louder, spilling past his row, past the curtain that separated economy from business. It was instinct more than intention, the way his grandmother had taught him. When pain filled a room, you answered with music. The melody wound its way through the cabin, weaving between the hum of engines and the clink of glasses. Passengers closest to him heard first, pausing mid-sentence, brows lifting. The tune was unfamiliar yet haunting, something older than pop songs, deeper than nursery rhymes. It carried a warmth that felt like a hand on a trembling shoulder. Charlotte's scream broke on a hiccup. Her tiny body shuddered, fists still clenched, but her eyes blinked wide as though something had startled her. She stilled just long enough for Evelyn to notice. The silence was brief, fragile. But in that split second, Evelyn's heart leapt. She glanced down at her daughter, confused. The bottle hadn't worked, nor had the pacifier. Nothing she'd done had made a difference. Yet here was Charlotte, her cries softening, her gaze searching the air as if hunting for a sound. Then Malik's voice shifted. He sang actual words now, low and tender, though the language was more feeling than meaning. His voice wasn't polished, but it had truth in it, raw, untrained beauty that came from somewhere deeper than technique. The cabin began to quiet, passengers glancing toward the being, back where the sound rose. Charlotte's sobs broke apart, stuttering into small hiccups, then stopped altogether. She turned her head toward the aisle, eyes wide, lips forming a small O of wonder. She blinked once, twice, and then let out a soft coo. The cabin froze. A baby who had been inconsolable for nearly an hour was suddenly silent. Not just silent, entranced. Evelyn stared in disbelief, her arms slack with exhaustion, her cheeks wet with tears she hadn't realized had fallen. For the first time since the plane left the ground, Charlotte looked calm because of a stranger's song. Someone whispered, "My God." A mother 2 rows back sighed with relief, leaning into her husband. The tension that had crackled in the cabin began to ease. Passengers exchanged looks, some smiling, some still stunned, while phones quietly appeared, recording the impossible moment. But Evelyn's relief twisted into something sharper. Her baby, her daughter, had found peace in the voice of a boy sitting in economy. Not from her arms, not from her efforts. The humiliation pricked like needles. She should have been the one to comfort Charlotte, to bring her calm. Instead, her child had chosen someone else. Malik kept singing, his eyes closed, his small shoulders rising and falling with each breath. In his mind, he wasn't on a plane anymore. He was in his grandmother's apartment again, sitting on the old floral couch while she sang through pain that work and sickness couldn't silence. He sang now the way she had sung then, with everything inside him, with love pressed into every note. Charlotte giggled, just once, soft and bubbling, the sound so pure it sent a ripple through the cabin. Several passengers actually clapped. Evelyn's throat tightened. Relief flooded her, but so did something else, something she couldn't name. Jealousy, shame, awe? She didn't know. She only knew her daughter had just chosen another's voice over her own. And as Malik's song floated through the air, wrapping around Char, Lottie like a blanket, Evelyn realized this flight was no longer just about getting from one city to another. Something had begun here, something she wasn't ready for, something she couldn't control. The boy in economy had done what she could not, and the entire plane had witnessed it. The applause faded into murmurs, a ripple of disbelief that filled the cabin with something softer than irritation, but sharper than silence. Malik lowered his voice, letting the melody taper off into a hum, almost like he was afraid to claim the power of what had just happened. He sank back into his seat, shoulders tightening as if he could fold himself invisible. The passengers near him glanced over curiously, whispering about the boy in the faded jersey who had quieted an entire plane with nothing but a song. Beside him, Miss Leia leaned closer, her eyes glimmering with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "That was more than pretty," she said gently. "Where'd you learn that song?" Malik shrugged, eyes fixed on his lap. "My grandma taught me. She said songs were medicine when nothing else worked." His voice cracked slightly, the weight of memory slipping through his calm. "You sing often?" she pressed, though her tone was tender, not prying. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Mostly when it's too loud. Sirens, fights outside, nights when the heat went out." He paused, swallowed hard. "She said music could fix what was broken, even if it was just inside you." Miss Leia's throat tightened. She recognized the cadence in his voice, the way his words carried echoes of someone who had lived old truths long before his time. "Your grandmother still with us?" Malik shook his head, quick and small. 2 months. Her heart ached. She reached out, patted his hand gently. "I'm sorry, baby, but she's in that voice. I can hear her." Up in business class, Charlotte was still calm, still staring wide-eyed towed at the back as if she could see straight through the curtain to the boy who had soothed her storm. Evelyn shifted her daughter in her arms, confusion swirling with unease. Charlotte had ignored the pacifier, the bottle, every polished technique Evelyn had studied. But this boy's song, she had answered instantly, like her heart had been waiting for it. Passengers around Evelyn whispered openly now. "Incredible," a mother with 2 toddlers sighed, watching Charlotte play with her fingers. "It's like a gift," another man said. But not everyone was kind. The businessman in 4B smirked and leaned just close enough for Evelyn to hear. Money can't buy everything, can it? Some things you just don't have. The words sank like stones in her chest. She forced her expression into neutrality, but inside her pride twisted. She wasn't used to failing in public. She wasn't used to being exposed, undone in front of strangers. She pressed her lips to Charlotte's hair, but her daughter wasn't listening. Her daughter was still searching for the voice that had soothed her, not for her mother's embrace. Evelyn told herself it didn't matter. A baby's momentary calm didn't mean anything. It was coincidence, that was all. Yet her throat burned with something unspoken, fear perhaps, or shame that the truth was more complicated. Behind the curtain, Malik slouched deeper, trying to escape the stares, but Miss Leia wouldn't let him shrink away. "Do you know what you have, child?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "It's just singing." "No," she said firmly. "It's more than that. It's love turned into sound. Not everyone can do that." Malik looked down, embarrassed, and pulled his crumpled boarding pass from his pocket, smoothing it against his knee. Across the back, faint pencil lines traced little notes, crooked and uneven. Miss Leia leaned closer. "What's that?" "Songs," he said, voice shy. "The way Grandma sang them. I don't know how to write real music, so I made my own way." He studied the markings with care, her heart tugging. This boy, this quiet child in a worn jersey, had been preserving history on scraps of paper, clinging to his grandmother's legacy as if it were oxygen. Up front, Charlotte stirred again, testing the edges of a cry. Evelyn's body tensed, already bracing for another round of humiliation. But before Charlotte could wail, Malik's hum floated once more, carried on recycled air like a thread of light. And again, Charlotte stilled, her lips curling into something Evelyn had hardly ever seen. A smile. Evelyn's breath caught. Relief and devastation collided in her chest. She rocked her daughter, but her eyes drifted toward the back of the plane, toward a boy she hadn't noticed at the gate. A boy she hadn't wanted to notice. Around her, passengers whispered louder now. "He's a miracle worker," one said. "Some kids just have the gift," another agreed. But Evelyn heard the harsher voices too. What kind of mother can't soothe her own baby? Maybe she lets nannies do everything for her. Each word cut deeper than the last. Her baby had stopped crying, but Evelyn's heart had never felt so loud. And in row 32, Malik's voice lingered in the air, fragile and steady, a gift born of loss, carrying more than just a lullaby. It carried survival, it carried love, and it was just beginning to change everything. The cabin had grown strangely hushed, as though every passenger was waiting for the next note. Malik's voice was no longer just a sound, it was an anchor. Even the faint roar of the engine seemed to fall in step with his melody. Charlotte, once inconsolable, now rested quietly in her mother's arms, her eyelids fluttering with the rhythm of his song. For the first time since boarding, Evelyn felt her daughter's body soften against her, not stiff with distress, not rigid with pain. Relief washed over her, but it was a fragile, eating thing, because it wasn't her who had brought Charlotte peace. Evelyn's arms cradled her daughter, but her heart twisted with a sharp ache. She had tried everything, bottles, pacifiers, rocking whispers, and all of it had failed. Yet this boy, this stranger from economy in his threadbare jersey, had accomplished what she could not with nothing but a tune passed down from his grandmother. Around her, passengers murmured with wonder, some smiling, some even chuckling in relief. She felt their eyes shift toward her, their silent comparisons digging beneath her skin. "Isn't that something?" a woman across the aisle whispered to her husband. "A child with a gift." Her husband's reply stung Evelyn, even though it wasn't meant for her. "Makes you wonder, what kind of mother can't quiet her own baby?" The businessman in 4B leaned back with a satisfied smirk. "Figures," he muttered, just loud enough for Evelyn to hear. "Some people can buy the seat, but not the skills that matter." Evelyn's throat tightened. Humiliation pressed against her ribs until she thought she might shatter. She wanted to scream at them all, to tell them they didn't understand, that she had given up her career, her sleep, her entire life to try and be enough for Charlotte, that no book, no nanny, no doctor had found the key to calming her child. She wanted to shout that it wasn't her fault, that she wasn't failing, but Charlotte's small body shifted in her arms, her face tilting toward the faint melody rising from the back of the plane. Evelyn followed her gaze and felt the resentment spark like a match inside her chest. She turned sharply in her seat, her voice slicing through the hushed awe of the cabin. "Can you please stop that?" The words landed harsher than she intended, laced with exhaustion, pride, and the sharp sting of being exposed. "You're not helping. I don't need more noise right now." The melody broke off instantly. Malik's head dropped, his voice swallowed as though it had never been. His face burned red as whispers erupted. He sank back into his seat, folding into himself, making his small frame even smaller. The shame on his features was so raw, it pierced even those who didn't know his name. Beside him, Miss Leia placed a firm hand on his arm. "Don't you mind her, baby," she whispered fiercely, her eyes flashing toward the front of the plane. "Stress makes people cruel. Don't let it steal your gift." But Malik couldn't lift his head. His grandmother's words echoed in him. "Don't go where you're not wanted, child. Sing where the song belongs." He clenched his hands in his lap, willing himself not to cry in front of strangers. Up in business class, Charlotte's calm unraveled in seconds. Without the song, she squirmed, her mouth twisting, her small cries returning with a vengeance. Within moments, the cries turned back into full-bodied screams, piercing the cabin like a siren. Passengers who had just exhaled in relief groaned audibly. Some muttered under their breath, others shifted angrily in their seats. "Great," the businessman huffed. "Just great, back to this." Evelyn rocked Charlotte desperately, panic rising. The pacifier was rejected, the bottle useless. Her daughter's face reddened, her tiny body stiffening, screams escalating into that breathless, choking cry that terrified every parent. Evelyn's heart pounded, her pride fighting with her fear. She glanced toward the back of the plane but quickly turned away. She wouldn't ask him. But Charlotte's cries grew worse, filling the cabin with raw distress. Flight attendants rushed down the aisle, their professional calm straining under the noise. A mother 2 rows back covered her children's ears. A young man groaned, "This is unbearable." Even those who had been sympathetic earlier now looked drained, their patience thinning. And through it all, Malik sat silent, staring at his hands, his gift locked behind humiliation. His song had been banished, his heart told he wasn't wanted. Miss Leia's eyes glistened with quiet fury. She leaned toward him and whispered, "Sometimes doing right means risking being wrong. Don't let her pride silence what's inside you." Malik didn't move. Not yet. His chest heaved with the weight of choice. Up front, Evelyn whispered frantically to her baby, but Charlotte's face had turned purple with rage, her breath hitching dangerously. Panic clawed through Evelyn's chest. For the first time, she felt not just shame, but fear. Real, bone-deep fear that she couldn't help her own child. And in that fragile, terrifying moment, she realized the boy she had silenced might be the only hope she had left. Charlotte's cries tore through the cabin like a fire alarm, relentless and panicked, her tiny chest heaving as if each breath cost her more than she had to give. Her face had gone from red to a frightening purple, her body stiff with rage and exhaustion. Evelyn's arms trembled as she tried to rock her, whispering promises she didn't believe herself. "Please, Charlotte. Please, baby. Mommy's here. Just stop, just breathe." The words shook, splintering with her fear, but nothing worked. The businessman in 4B pressed his fingers against his temple with exaggerated disgust. "This is outrageous," he muttered loudly. "First-class ticket ruined by this circus." A young woman across the aisle snapped at him. "She's doing her best." But even her voice carried the sharp edge of someone near the end of their patience. Flight attendants crowded around Evelyn, their hands full of solutions that had already failed. Warm bottles, new pacifiers, a soft blanket, whispered reassurances. Nothing pierced the baby's storm. One attendant crouched low, her tone calm but urgent. "Ma'am, she's starting to hyperventilate. You need to help her regulate her breathing." "I'm trying," Evelyn cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't know how. She won't." Her voice cracked as Charlotte gasped, a terrifying sound that sent dread pulsing through the cabin. The businessman huffed again, but even his arrogance faltered at the sight of a baby in real distress. Back in row 32, Malik sat frozen, his knuckles white as he gripped his boarding pass. His grandmother's words throbbed in his head. "Dignity is power. Don't go where you're not wanted." But Miss Leia's voice cut through the memory, sharp and tender all at once. "Baby," she whispered, her hand warm on his shoulder. "Sometimes the world doesn't know what it needs until you give it. That little girl needs you." Malik's throat tightened. He wanted to help. He wanted to sing. But Evelyn's harsh words still stung. "Stop it. You're making me look incompetent." The rejection sat heavy on his chest. He stared down at his hands, willing them not to shake. Then Charlotte gasped again, a horrible, ragged sound. The flight attendant's professional tone cracked with urgency. "She's working herself into a dangerous state." The entire cabin went still. Phones were lowered. Whispering stopped. Even the businessman fell silent. Everyone's eyes shifted toward the back of the plane, to the boy who had silenced the storm once before. Evelyn's pride shattered like glass under the weight of fear. She looked toward the back, searching, and her eyes locked on Malik. Her lips trembled, her voice broke. Please. The single word carried everything: humiliation, desperation, surrender. For Evelyn Whitmore, who had built her life on control and perfection, saying it felt like tearing her heart open, but her daughter's gasping cries left her no choice. Please, help her. Malik rose slowly, his legs unsteady, his eyes wide with uncertainty. The cabin seemed to hold its breath as he walked forward, past rows of silent passengers, past glares that had turned into hope. He didn't loot. Take at Evelyn. He looked at Charlotte. Hey, little star, he murmured softly, kneeling so his eyes met hers. Remember me. Charlotte's cries didn't stop, but her glassy, tear-soaked eyes shifted toward him, searching. Malik began with a single note, long and steady, vibrating low in his chest like a heartbeat. Then another, a simple pattern. He breathed in, held, breathed out with a soft hum. Breathe with the sound, he told Evelyn quietly, his voice firm but gentle. She needs to feel calm from you too. Evelyn blinked at him, stunned, but the flight attendant nodded urgently. Do it, she said. Match him. Hands trembling, Evelyn tried. She hummed weakly, out of tune, her chest shaking with the effort. Charlotte's cries hitched, softened for a moment, then returned. Malik didn't flinch. He hummed again, steady and low, showing Evelyn the rhythm. Not perfect, he whispered. Just honest. She needs you. Evelyn tried again, this time following his pace. Her hum was shaky, broken, but it was there, and somehow, impossibly, Charlotte stilled. Her little fists unclenched, her cries shrank into soft hiccups, then into quiet breaths. The cabin erupted in sighs, whispers, even a few claps. But Malik didn't look at them. He kept his gaze on Charlotte, humming until her eyelids fluttered closed, until her tiny body went limp with exhausted sleep. Evelyn looked at him, her face streaked with tears. Gratitude swelled in her chest, but so did shame for the way she had spoken to him. I'm sorry, she whispered. Malik shook his head gently, still humming. Just take care of her. And in that moment, with the entire plane watching, Evelyn knew this boy had given her more than calm. He had given her a second chance to be what her daughter needed. The plane hummed with a silence that felt heavier than sound itself. Every passenger sat suspended between awe and relief, watching the unlikely tableau unfold. A glamorous woman in silk cradling her now sleeping baby, and a boy in a faded jersey cake. Kneeling at her side, his quiet humming still vibrating in the air like the aftertaste of a miracle. Evelyn barely dared to breathe, afraid any movement might break the spell and send Charlotte spiraling back into hysteria. Malik leaned back slowly, lowering his voice until the hum became almost imperceptible. His eyes softened as he looked at the baby, then flicked briefly to Evelyn before retreating toward his seat. But something inside Evelyn clenched. She reached out, stopping him with a trembling hand on his arm. Wait. Her voice was unsteady, barely above a whisper, but the weight of it hung in the air. Malik froze, shoulders tense, eyes cautious. Passengers leaned in, waiting to see if she would scold him again or thank him this time. Evelyn swallowed hard. The words caught in her throat. Apologies had never come easily to her. She had built her life on strength, on control, on never admitting weakness. But this wasn't about her pride anymore. I don't know how you did that, she said finally, her voice cracking with exhaustion. I've tried everything, and nothing works. But you calmed her like it was the most natural thing in the world. She looked down at Charlotte, asleep now, her tiny hand curled against her mother's blouse. Can you teach me? The request shocked even Evelyn. She had never asked anyone for help, not like this, not publicly, not from a child. But desperation had stripped her bare. For a moment, Malik just stared, his dark eyes searching hers, weighing her sincerity. Then he nodded, slow and deliberate. He eased himself into the empty aisle seat across from her, lowering his voice so only Evelyn could hear. My grandma used to say you don't just sing to someone, you sing for the room first, then for the heart. If the room is full of chaos, they'll feel it. If the room is calm, they'll feel that too. Evelyn frowned, confused, but listening with an intensity she hadn't given anyone in years. Sing for the room first? She repeated. Malik nodded. It means you have to calm yourself before you can calm her. Babies feel what you feel. If you're tense, they know it. If you breathe steady, they'll breathe steady too. Evelyn looked down at Charlotte, the weight of his words settling in her chest. Her mind replayed every frantic moment, her shaking hands, her rapid heartbeat, her whispered pleas laced with panic. She realized she hadn't been calming Charlotte at all. She had been feeding her fear. "How?" she whispered. "Start small," Malik said, his voice low and steady. "Not singing, just humming. Doesn't matter if it's pretty. Just pick 2 notes, like this." He demonstrated softly. 2 notes rising and falling, simple and steady, like the rocking of a cradle. "Match it with your breathing. In, hold, hum out." Evelyn tried, her voice wavering. The sound was thin, uneven, but Malik nodded. "Good. Keep it low. Let her feel the vibration in your chest when you hold her." Evelyn pressed Charlotte closer, humming again. Her tone cracked halfway through, but she pushed on. Charlotte stirred, her little head shifting against her mother's chest. Evelyn panicked, thinking she'd failed, but Malik shook his head firmly. "Don't stop. She's listening." So Evelyn hummed again, forcing her body to slow, her breath to match the rhythm. This time, Charlotte relaxed, her tiny hands stretching open as though reaching for the sound. Evelyn's chest tightened, not with panic, but with awe. A tear slipped down her cheek. She looked at Malik, her voice breaking. She hears me?" "She hears your calm," Malik corrected softly. "That's what she's been waiting for." Evelyn pressed her lips together, struggling to contain the flood of emotions. She had spent 6 months feeling like a failure, drowning in judgment, smothered by her own pride. Yet here was this boy, barely 13, teaching her more about motherhood in 5 minutes than all the parenting books, classes, and advice ever had. The passengers around them watched in silence, many with tears in their eyes. Even the businessman in 4B sat rigid, his scorn muted, his eyes betraying something that looked uncomfortably like respect. Evelyn hummed again, steadier now, her voice quiet but determined. Charlotte stirred, then settled deeper into her arms. For the first time, Evelyn felt not like an imposter, but like a mother who could give her child peace. She looked back at Malik, her voice trembling. "Thank you." Malik ducked his head, shy and awkward, but Miss Leia reached over from her row, her smile warm and certain. "Child," she said, her eyes fixed on Evelyn, "you've just sung your very first real lullaby. Don't stop now." And in that fragile moment, Evelyn understood. This wasn't just about calming her daughter. It was about learning her song, learning to be present, to be still, to be the mother Charlotte needed her to be. The captain's voice crackled through the speakers, calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're expecting a patch of turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Almost instantly, the plane shuddered, a sharp dip that pulled a gasp from several passengers. Overhead bins rattled, coffee cups tipped, and the hum of conversation spiked into nervous chatter. Evelyn's heart jumped into her throat. She tightened her grip on Charlotte, who startled awake with a sharp, panicked cry. The baby's little body tensed, her mouth opening in a wail that cut through the cabin like glass. Evelyn's pulse surged. Not again, not here, not now. She could already feel the judgment of 100 pairs of eyes burning into her. Charlotte's cries rose higher with each shake of the plane. Evelyn bounced her instinctively, shushing with the frantic desperation of someone trying to stop an avalanche with bare hands. "Please, baby, please, not now," she begged. Her voice cracked with terror, the same old spiral pulling her down. The passengers shifted uncomfortably, bracing for another endless round of screaming. Malik turned in his seat, his dark eyes steady, but he didn't move. He didn't sing. He just watched, waiting. Miss Leia leaned forward, her voice low but insistent. "This is your moment, Evelyn. Don't look at him. Don't wait for him. You know what to do." Evelyn's throat tightened. Her first instinct was to look toward Malik, to plead silently for his song to rescue her again. But Charlotte's cries hitched into those awful gasps, and Evelyn remembered his words. Sing for the room first. Be calm to give calm. Her chest was heaving, her hands trembling. She pressed her daughter closer, closing her eyes against the chaos. She forced herself to inhale deep, to match the rhythm Malik had shown her. In, hold, hum. The first sound that left her was shaky, broken, but it was there. Charlotte didn't stop, not yet. Her cries trembled, but they didn't vanish. Evelyn's panic flared. "I'm failing again," she thought desperately. "She only wants him, not me." "No," Miss Leia whispered sharply, as if she'd read her mind. "She wants you. Keep going." Evelyn inhaled again, slower this time. She hummed the 2 notes Malik had taught her. Not pretty, not smooth, but steady. She rocked with the rhythm of the sound, her chest vibrating gently against Charlotte's tiny body. The plane jolted again, another pocket of turbulence, and Charlotte let out a startled scream. Evelyn's grip tightened, her voice almost cracked. But instead of stopping, she pressed harder into the sound. Hum, hum, hum. And then, miraculously, Charlotte's cries softened, from sharp wails to whimpers, from whimpers to hiccups, until finally her head nestled against her mother's chest, her breathing syncing with Evelyn's. The cabin shifted in energy. Passengers who had braced for chaos now sat wide-eyed in silence. The businessman and 4B, who had been halfway to summoning a flight attendant, froze mid-gesture. A young mother across the aisle mouthed the word "wow" with a stunned expression. Evelyn opened her eyes, tears streaming freely down her face. She hummed again, and this time the sound was stronger, steadier, something real. Charlotte stirred but did not cry. She stayed calm, soothed not by Malik, but by her mother. Evelyn looked across the cabin, locking eyes with Malik. He gave the smallest nod, pride flickering in his gaze before he turned back toward his seat. He hadn't sung a single note. He hadn't needed to. Miss Leia smiled, her voice carrying just enough for Evelyn to hear. "See, the song was in you all along. You just had to believe it." Evelyn kissed the top of Charlotte's head, her heart pounding with relief. She had done it. For the first time, she had truly soothed her daughter. The pride that filled her chest was different from the kind she wore in boardrooms. It wasn't polished or public. It was quiet, raw, and honest. The turbulence eased, the plane leveling out once more. But inside Evelyn, something had shifted permanently. She wasn't just a woman holding a baby anymore. She was a mother who had found her voice. And in that moment, Evelyn knew this flight wasn't just carrying her to a destination. It was carrying her to a new version of herself. The announcement came over the intercom, smooth and practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have begun our descent into New York. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." The cabin buzzed with movement as trays clicked shut, seat backs straightened, and anxious travelers checked their watches. But in business class, Evelyn's world had narrowed to the tiny weight in her arms. Charlotte stirred, her eyes fluttering open, the first whimper slipping from her lips. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. Not again. Not now. They were almost there, but the thought of Charlotte unraveling during descent, the ear pressure, the noise, the chaos, filled her with dread. Charlotte fussed louder, her little fists flailing. Evelyn tried the pacifier, the bottle, but nothing worked. The familiar panic threatened to surge again, but this time she stopped herself. She closed her eyes, inhaled deep, and began the low hum Malik had taught her. 2 notes, steady and calm. The vibrations flowed through her chest, against her daughter's cheek. Charlotte whimpered, then paused. Her tiny eyes lifted, searching Evelyn's face, listening. Evelyn hummed again, slower, more confident, and Charlotte stilled. It wasn't perfect. Evelyn's hum cracked, her voice broke, but it didn't matter. The sound was enough. The baby nestled against her, soothed by something her mother had finally learned to give. Passengers nearby exchanged glances of astonishment. A woman whispered, "She's doing it herself now." Even the businessman in 4B, who had rolled his eyes for most of the flight, leaned back without a word. Evelyn felt it, the quiet shift of judgment into respect. In the back of the plane, Malik watched. His lips curved into the faintest smile, though his hands twisted nervously in his lap. Tomorrow loomed large in his mind, the audition, the chance that could change his life forever. But as he watched, Evelyn held her daughter with new steadiness. He felt something loosen in his chest. For the first time since his grandmother's passing, he saw proof that her song still lived, still mattered. They hadn't died with her. They had taken root in someone else. The plane shuddered as it dipped lower through a bank of clouds. Gasps echoed, and Charlotte startled, her cries threatening to return. Evelyn caught herself before the panic rose. She placed a hand on her daughter's back and hummed louder, steady against the bumps of turbulence. Malik leaned into the aisle from row 32, offering the smallest nod of encouragement. Evelyn caught it and kept going. Charlotte settled again, clinging to the rhythm of her mother's voice. The hum of engines deepened as the city lights glittered faintly through the windows. Passengers pressed against their armrests, eager to land. Evelyn glanced down at Charlotte, then back toward Malik. She mouthed the words, "Thank you." Malik dipped his head shyly, but Miss Leia spoke for him, her voice warm and strong from across the aisle. "You found your song, honey. Don't let go of it now." The landing gear deployed with a heavy thump, rattling the cabin. A few nervous passengers tensed, but Evelyn stayed calm, humming through it. She felt the baby's breath match her own, and for the first time, she believed she could carry this rhythm home with her, into sleepless nights, into lonely mornings, into every moment her daughter needed her. The wheels touched down with a bump and a roar. Applause broke out, scattered at first, then growing, not just for the landing, but for the strange journey the passengers had all witnessed. A boy's song had silenced chaos. A mother had found her voice, and a plane full of strangers had learned that sometimes miracles don't come from power or wealth, but from the overlooked gifts of the least expected. As the plane Taxied to the gate, Evelyn looked down at Charlotte, sleeping again, her small lips curved in something like a smile. She pressed a kiss to her forehead, her voice soft with wonder. "We'll be okay, my little star. We'll be okay." And behind her, Malik clutched his grandmother's penciled notes on a crumpled boarding pass, whispering to himself the same words she had always told him. Sing for the room first, then for the heart. Tomorrow, it would be his turn. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows of the Manhattan Conservatory of Music, casting long golden streaks across the polished marble floors. For Malik, standing in the lobby with his wrinkled boarding pass clutched tight in his hands, it felt less like a building and more like a mountain. Every step inside carried the weight of his grandmother's hopes, his aunt's sacrifices, and the quiet faith of a boy who had sung lullabies into thin walls to drown out hunger and sirens. He tried to steady his breathing, but his chest was tight. His sneakers squeaked faintly against the floor as he followed the assistant into a rehearsal room. His knees felt weak. Sing for the room first, he reminded himself, then for the heart. Inside, a silver-haired woman with sharp, knowing eyes sat behind a grand piano. "Mr. Thompson?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Malik whispered. "I understand you've had quite a journey to get here." Her gaze softened. "When you're ready, I'd like to hear what you've brought." Malik closed his eyes. The fluorescent lights above were too bright, the silence too loud, doubt crowded in. But then, through the wall, faint and steady, he thought he heard it. A hum. Evelyn's hum, the two-note pattern he had taught her. He opened his eyes. She was out there in the lobby, holding Charlotte, giving him back his own lesson. The thought grounded him. He lifted his chin. "I'll start with Bright Morning Star," he said, "my grandmother's version." The first note trembled, but then it opened, pure and steady, filling the room. His voice rose and fell like a tide, weaving through every corner. It wasn't just a song, it was a history. It was nights on the floral couch, his grandmother's tired voice keeping them warm when the heat was cut off. It was laughter through hunger, hope through pain. It was survival turned into music. The examiner's expression softened, her pen stilled. When the final note faded, Malik stood there, chest heaving, every nerve buzzing. She let the silence stretch, then finally spoke. "And the second piece?" Malik swallowed, his throat dry. "Sure on this shining night," he said, and began. His voice shifted, delicate and careful, wrapping around Barbara's melody with surprising control. Not perfect, not polished, but honest. And when he finished, his shoulders sagged as if the weight of his whole life had just been poured into those songs. The examiner set down her pen. "Mr. Thompson, students walk in here every year with training, coaches, privilege. But what you've brought, raw truth, a voice shaped by life itself that cannot be taught. Welcome to the program." The words hit him like light breaking through storm clouds. His legs nearly buckled. He managed to whisper, "Thank you." Outside in the lobby, Evelyn pressed a kiss to Charlotte's hair, tears slipping silently down her face as she watched Malik emerge, his face stunned, his eyes bright. Their gazes met. Evelyn didn't speak. She simply mouthed, "You did it." And in that moment, Malik understood. It hadn't just been him who learned something on that plane. Evelyn had found her voice too. She had learned her song, the one that only she could sing for her daughter. Later, as they stepped out into the noise of the city, Charlotte giggled in Evelyn's arms, reaching for Malik with her chubby hands. He bent down, letting her grab his finger, and whispered, "Sing for the room first, little star, then for the sun, don't stay." The heart. The final note of the journey was not his song, but Charlotte's babbling hum, clumsy and sweet, echoing the rhythm that had saved them all. A reminder that the music his grandmother had given him now lived on in places he'd never expected, in a crying baby, a humbled mother, and the new paths that had opened because he dared to share it. The mountain no longer felt so high. The song would carry him the rest of the way.